Welcome back to Sheltered Sages, the podcast where two formerly sheltered homeschoolers talk about the complexities of life, one story at a time. My name is Philip.
And my name is Andrew. And as you can kind of see right off the bat, we have a little bit of a different tone for our episode today. It is the semester finale.
Yep.
And we wanted to talk about something that is a little bit harder to discuss. So, for those of you who are in the homeschool community, for those of you who are not in the homeschool community, we want to just put this disclaimer up at the front. You read the title of this episode, The Dark Side of Homeschooling. We're not talking about Star Wars. We are talking about some very, very challenging parts and aspects of homeschooling.
Yeah.
We had our fight for homeschooling and the validity of what it can do back in our first semester. But we recognize that, especially more recently, some of the negative side effects that can come from homeschooling. And we wanted to make sure that we talked about that, give that some light, and kind of discuss, well, just what all of that entails. And as sometimes just bringing awareness to it can be just as important as even doing something about it, because it helps that next step to actually physically doing something, is being aware that there's a problem.
Yeah, there's episodes before that we called, funnily enough, the homeschool wars, where we talked about the positives of what that was. And even later on, we brought our parents on there. But one of the biggest things that we kind of discussed through with our parents were some of the negatives that happen with it. Mm-hmm. Once again, what we kind of came away with that episode was that homeschooling, while it can be good, it's not for everyone, and it's not for every single situation. And I know for probably some of the viewers or other people who are listening, we're thinking, okay, well, what are those negatives? What are those things that happen there? And it isn't the best. It's not the happiest kind of story. I know that a lot of times people are used to us like making jokes and talking about how fun things are, but there is some reality towards what homeschooling can do to people if not done correctly.
Yeah.
So this episode is more talking about that. It's not on a funny, once again, we're not going to be like popping a bunch of jokes about it or doing things like that, because it can get very serious and there's a lot of topics that we're talking through. So if you are not comfortable with that, or you're not prepared for that kind of conversation, that's okay. Absolutely. You don't have to listen to this episode. Honestly, we will put things in the description down below that you can like skip to the ending if you just want to hear the ending or do anything like that. But we're going to talk about it because I feel passionate about it.
Yeah.
Andrew feels passionate about it. And I'm going to open this up. Let's open up the episode this way.
Okay.
We were discussing before whether or not we should talk about this kind of side of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And I even was very hesitant because I know this can get very tricky.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want to go over and condemn different individuals who are doing homeschooling different ways, or talk about the different systems that kind of built up how homeschooling is today and some of the darker sides of it. Mm-hmm. That said, we kind of both agreed that it would be a disservice to our viewers and to you who are watching if we didn't discuss this side of it.
Absolutely.
To bring voices to people who potentially don't have that kind of voice.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's just a really good segue. So I will go ahead and put a disclaimer here. We will be talking about mental health challenges. We're going to be talking about depression. We're going to be talking about anxiety. We're going to avoid some of the incredibly darker topics, but there will be conversations of child abuse and conversations of other things of that nature. So please consider this your blanket warning. If, again, we recognize this might not be an episode for everyone. For those who are wanting to stay and wanting to listen, I have the goal for today is to not end with just glower and depression, but kind of talk about, I don't want to even say a positive, but just kind of talk about a light at the end of the tunnel, or a next step forward, or things of that nature, where it's not about sitting in the mud, sitting in the murk, sitting in the awful, but seeing what can we do about it, and also, what can you, whether you are a homeschool parent, whether you are someone who is being homeschooled, whether you are a person who has never heard about homeschooling until you started watching this podcast, like, you are someone who can effectively help an individual who might be going through one of these circumstances. So I'm going to transition, and this is going to be a little bit different from our normal episode formula. Obviously, we're not doing an interview. There's no extra person here today, but we're not doing our traditional Reddit stories. There aren't going to be pickle feet in this episode, because we just want to kind of talk about the reality of the situation, and that needs a level of, I think, respect.
Absolutely,
that has to be done.
So since we're getting into the episode, I think it's good to get into the episode.
We're good to get into it.
Can I introduce the first section that we're talking about over here?
Absolutely, but we should probably start the episode now.
So hopping into this, what Andrew was saying about before, we're not going to talk about normal Reddit stories today, but we potentially are going to bring up some Reddit stories over here. So if you've ever been on Reddit looking up different homeschool stuff, you've probably seen the main one, which I think is like r/homeschooling or something like that, where they talk about different things that you can do for your homeschool kid. A lot of them, which I thought were very funny, is they had all these things of their homeschool setups, basically. So it's like showing
rate my setup.
Exactly, rate my setup. Like, this is where my kid does their homeschool at. This is where they have their books and things like that. It goes over. If you've searched any further in there, you probably saw another subreddit, which is not as happy on there. And it is called Homeschool Recovery.
Yeah.
Now, to put like a simplistic description on this, this is a place where a lot of former homeschoolers or active homeschoolers have gone to talk about the different situations that they've gone through and their sometimes unfortunate homeschool experiences that are out there. A lot of them generally talk about how when they were homeschooled, how it affected them poorly, and how they are not as appreciative of that experience.
Yeah. So it was actually, and it was interesting, in prep for this semester, we had started getting much more involved in like our socials and engaging with the community. And we had looked at this subreddit, and I hadn't been aware of this subreddit before we started this semester. And when I started reading some of these things, it genuinely like broke my heart. I literally told Philip, I was like, I can't keep reading these because they just like, it puts me in this place where it's like I want to do something and I can't do anything other than being like, I'm so sorry, this is what you went through. So Philip, you found a story that you wanted to read, because I don't want to try and just find a random one, but we wanted to read one where it kind of was able to give you an idea of what is talked about in this subreddit and what kind of led to us starting to have this discussion about like what is some of the negative side effects of homeschooling and some of the more minute details that sometimes get overlooked when we just focus on the stuff through rose-colored glasses.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
that story.
But before we hop into that, just a lot of the stories in there and the trend for that subreddit is basically the idea of recovering from your homeschool experience.
Yeah.
A lot of them have the kind of mentality and the style of going, I did not like my homeschool experience, and it didn't teach me how to survive life outside of that one environment. And so a lot of the homeschool recovery, which has that second part of it, is trying to figure out how to fit into social settings, how to find out how to work with other individuals, how to do normal, let's say, everyday stuff. And a lot of them are like, I don't know how to do that, which is very sad. This specific story is not exactly along those lines. So most of them are very, very sad. And we didn't want to read one of those direct ones just because that's not this kind of podcast right here. But this is kind of a middle road to kind of let you know what the similar thing is. So the title of this one is All of Our Parents Were Stupid. Now they have an expletive before stupid. You can fill it in yourself if you'd like to. I'm going to read some of this and kind of filter through it. So this one is, how can they be so dumb and think they are qualified to homeschool? Someone said a few days ago, they don't homeschool for their children, they homeschool for themselves. Nothing can be more true. I'm hearing repeated ignorance from my mother, the person who demanded homeschooling in the first place. From not understanding US government to thinking Columbus was Portuguese or Spanish. The stupidity never stops. She thinks she's automatically smart because she got a bachelor's degree, yet gets upset when told the guy was Italian. Also got mad when I told her about the naming of the American continents. Who is Amerigo Vespucci? Instead, I had to suffer through weird homeschool gatherings, alternative versions of associations that already existed. Homeschool 4-H is just arrogant snobs gatekeeping their children from the public school children. And that's the story. That's basically how it goes across. So I'd say, Andrew, in the similar way that we do this podcast, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really hard hearing those stories. And like, it's a really complex situation because you hear a story like that and you absolutely get frustrated for them on the behalf of being taught by a parent who seems to have a refusal to learn, a refusal to recognize that they might not know everything, which is frustrating. It's hard because you read through these, and that's going to be a common theme as you begin reading through these stories of people sharing their experiences, and you almost either feel incredibly sorry for them, incredibly empathetic towards their situation, or you find yourself being challenged of like, what is going on here in this situation? And like, that's a common occurrence that I see a lot. One of the things that like actually, let's hear your thoughts before I continue on with mine.
You're good. It's interesting. So with this specific story, they're talking about how they are frustrated, just to clarify, they're frustrated with their parents not being as educated as they would like to actually learn new things. Which, if you're looking at the subreddit, a lot of that is a lot of the, I guess, former students' frustrations. They wanted to learn something, but they're realizing that the information they're being given by their parents is not the information that is actually based off of factual anything, basically. Yeah. And so imagine growing up in an echo chamber knowing it's an echo chamber. Mm-hmm. Imagine growing up in a system where it's like nothing that you're being taught is it's not true. Mm-hmm. And like you can say that for, let's say, a public school or some other places like that. I know there's a ton of people who are on here right now. They're like typing out, well, public schools do the same thing. I absolutely agree with you. There is so much history that has been skewed by so many other individuals that are out there.
Sorry, he's looking at the camera.
Yes. That said, I do feel that at a certain point when you're trying to educate yourself and you're trying to learn things that are going to help you later on in life and pass tests and go to college and do things, going over and saying, well, I feel like this person is not Italian and I'm going to argue against you for that, even though you can go over and do a Google search and prove that they kind of are.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, why are we arguing against this? Not only does it not help, but it also makes your kid feel so belittled across there. And what we're seeing here is not necessarily anything, I would even say, with homeschooling in general, as much as this is a parent who is very, very stubborn about this is what this is. I don't want to back down on it. And a kid who can't get their parent to change their mind.
You're absolutely right. You're going to see story after story after story of kids talking about their perspective, and a parent who refused to listen to them or refuse to see it in any different way. And especially in a situation like that where they are a child and they are in a environment where sometimes they are the only people in that environment. Now you have an unbalanced power structure in place. And it's hard because there are many, many families that I have met that homeschool and do excellent because they put their kids first. They are putting an importance of education and fact and critical thinking and things of that nature, and understanding the importance of a well-faceted education.
Yes.
But just as much as there are those, it's very apparent, even just through the subreddit and other stories and testimonials I've read online of people who have experienced the exact opposite.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of that that's across there. And speaking of how that opposite goes across, there is a bunch of comments that are here as well.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to read it to just like let you know what this kind of world is. And this is a more tame story that's here.
Yeah.
One of the comments says, to answer your question, which the question was, are our parents all stupid, basically? And they said, to answer your question, unbridled narcissism and creating an echo chamber, basically. Like, this is what they're doing. OP responded and said, it's so soul destroying to look back at my childhood as a twisted experiment instead of guidance and patience nurturing. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we're probably going to talk about today. We brought up homeschool recovery. We brought up the stories. We brought up like basically this weird dynamic. But there is this complex interrelationship between parents and children and homeschooling.
Yeah.
It's few places that I've actually seen where homeschooling happens with people who are not the parents of the kid. Yes, if you're like a, I guess, Olympic star and you have like someone who stays over with you and homeschools you or something like that.
Yeah,
that
a lot
happen.
of child actors I've also seen is a very common one where
Exactly.
like they'll do curriculum or schooling outside of things, almost like a homeschool in that
Exactly.
environment.
Or, sorry, in that same way, if you have like a larger amount of money and you potentially could pay for somebody to come over and we'll say tutor or school your kid from home. So that's a situation. Now, I'd still say most people who are homeschooling are not in that anywhere in that situation. A lot of the homeschool parents are at this location where they have enough funds to actually have one parent stay at home and like the other parent go out and work. And while that parent's staying home, they are teaching their kid.
There are also some examples I've seen where the parents both work, but one works in the day, one works in the night. And so they sometimes will like flip off that where it's like, well, the one who's home during the day will homeschool the kids during the day. And then the ones who are home there at night will homeschool during the night. I've even seen stories of like single parents who are working and also trying to homeschool at the same time, which that's a very brave endeavor.
Absolutely.
Very brave endeavor.
A lot of work that goes into that. So with the different kind of family systems that generally do homeschooling, the one that we're probably going to talk about the most is the one parent that's staying home while the other parent is going out and working, and that one parent that stays home is schooling the kids.
Yeah.
Because of that, I wanted to clarify, be really specific across there. This is not an indictment on that family system. It is not an indictment on any of those kind of choices that goes across there. That is your choice, whether you want both parents to go over and work, whether you want one parent to go over and work. If you both cannot work, congratulations.
Yes,
That's
jealous.
fantastic.
Let me know what you
Very
did.
jealous of that. That said, like, not an indictment on that at all. It's not even a conversation on what you're doing towards there. It's more specifically, a lot of the times that we see this kind of complication does come from that very specific scenario where you have that one parent who is educating the students. To put another little caveat there, this is also not necessarily talking about parenting. I am not a parent.
Yes.
I will quickly say that and quickly easily go across and say that I do not have really any parenting advice that I can say should carry much weight in any situation. That being said, what we're talking about today is more the homeschool situation that can happen in that kind of atmosphere, and a lot of the situations that happen with students that are out there.
Yeah.
Both Andrew and I were homeschool students. That's the whole premise of this podcast.
Yeah.
We have experienced it. I will say that both of our homeschool experiences were relatively positive. And so I'm not going to say like, oh, I've experienced everything that's on the homeschool recovery stuff that's over there, or that like I'm completely against it, because in a very similar way, there are some experiences that I have shared with some of the individuals that are on this homeschool recovery subreddit. And that's not to say that homeschool is bad or good. What we're trying to say here is kind of what we said in the other episodes. It is not for everyone.
Yeah.
But when done properly in the right experience and the right situations, it can work.
Yeah. And being vigilant to make sure, especially if you are a parent or you are the person who is educating the child, that you recognize that being a teacher is it means you're also a lifelong learner.
Yes.
And that's one of the, like, even that story that you just talked about, that was one of the problems.
Yes.
Is OP's mom refusing to acknowledge or learn new information, but would rather drag her heels in the mud and say, no, I'm right on this, regardless of the situation.
Absolutely. A lot of homeschool parents, and I'm going to bring it up, I'm going to say this often where I say a lot. I'm not saying for every single homeschool parent like situation that's over there, but a lot of homeschool parents have taken their kids out of public school or have decided not to go into public school, generally because they either want to teach their children specific things, or they want to keep their kids away from specific things. Yeah. And so what we see a lot over here, my parents, even if you listen to the podcast episode where they were there, they wanted to keep us out of school basically because they felt that there was a lot of complications that were happening there. And because they are religious and they had that kind of background, they wanted to give us a stronger background of Christianity than they knew that we would get in schools.
Yeah.
Beyond that, what my mom brings up often is that I had a very, I won't say stubborn spirit, but I had a very strong idea of right and wrong. And she was worried that I would get in a lot of trouble if I went to a public school, which, I give her that. I honestly feel like I probably would have. And, it's that kind of style. When we're talking about other situations, though, some parents can go, I would say, some homeschooling parents go very far in that side. Even parents I've talked to before, they have very strong opinions about various things. And while that might be good, have your opinions, think about those types of things, it gets tricky when you start trying to take those opinions and kind of make your entire education system based off around something that might not be factually proven. What we talked about in that story is a person who has this very strong idea about something that, if you do a really quick Google search, you're like, oh, that's not correct. But this can carry on to various other things.
Yeah. And it's hard too when you talk about like religion and you talk about things, because then there's another entire sect of people that'll be like, oh, so you're just wanting to indoctrinate your children from a very young age. And it's like, that's not the purpose. When I say that, I'm not saying like a good homeschooling parent, that shouldn't be the sole purpose. From what I have seen, it's all about a solid education, but then they also get to fold in their beliefs, their religious upbringing, and a good one will allow you to ask questions, will allow you to engage with it, will allow you to wrestle with it. It just like one of the things is I'm working on getting my degree in education, and I'm working on getting from a Christian university, which is pretty cool, literally had an entire class about like the ethics of teaching and discussing the importance of recognizing the different backgrounds that people come from and the different experiences that people have, and how it's important to both recognize and uplift those experiences and acknowledge them, but also challenge them to see different points of view and different perspectives. Both of those are just as important. And I think the danger that can happen with the sole focus on one is that we can focus so much on the uplifting the parent's perspective of things so heavily that we don't allow discussion of other perspectives. We don't allow discussion of other beliefs. And I recognize that there's an age where like, hey, we can have like, you wouldn't want to try and have like a complex dialogue with a third grader about like, well, politics. You wouldn't want to engage a third grader in like an actual political debate, but a ninth grader or even like an eighth grader talking about politics, or like one of the classes I was substituting, it was in middle school and they were reading Animal Farm. And there were some really interesting discussion questions that were encouraged by the teacher to really kind of talk about, you know, some of the mindsets that people come into things with. And so it's like, that's a really important, like, those are really important discussions to happen at an appropriate time.
Absolutely. And in the same thing of having those important discussions, I think that is one of the aspects that kind of needs to be pushed into it.
Yes.
What I appreciated my parents doing when I talked about them teaching us about all these other countries across the world, like we talked about Asia a lot in the curriculums that we went to, and we'll talk about curriculums a little bit later as well. But we talked about Asia a lot. And in a lot of, let's say, historical and even current Asian cultures, there is Buddhism that's out there. And so instead of my parents going over and saying, okay, we don't want you to believe in Buddhism, we want you to believe in Christianity, we're going to hide everything from you, they were open and willing to just like, we're going to explain what this is. We're going to let you read different information about it. We're going to allow you to be educated about this other religion. Not because they wanted us to go towards that religion, like they obviously didn't, but it's because instead of hiding us away from it, they decided that it would be better for us to be educated about it in a very positive and like safe way. Let me bring it up here just because I think it's interesting. I like science as well. Evolution versus creationism. Huge topic across there. Some people might not necessarily like it, but my parents allowed me to learn about evolution. I know, it's crazy.
I couldn't play Pokemon because evolution was a part of it, Philip. What are you talking about? I bring that up to my parents all the time, by the way.
Exactly. But it was not on the side of, they were like, okay, we feel like this is correct, or we feel like this. They just understood that instead of forcing me to not look at anything that was about that side, they're like, this is what they might show you. This is what other people believe. And we are okay, more than okay, with you learning it so that you know what this viewpoint is. And I think that gave me so much more respect for them because I knew they didn't agree with it. Like they were very, very like clear, like this is not what we believe in. But they were more than okay with me going over and learning as much as I wanted to about it. And I feel like that is important for anyone to do. Despite what you believe, allowing your students to explore other topics, to explore other things. Now, it doesn't mean like you got to go over and like open up the door like, hey, learn about anything in the entire world.
It's like, all right, let's learn how to summon a demon. All right, I've got my Ouija board.
I'd still say no to that. But like, you know, allow them, if they are interested in that kind of thing, maybe start letting them start learning about, okay, if you're, let's say, Christian or religious, learn about it from the perspective of your religion, and then also potentially learn about other things that are around that side in a safe and healthy way if they are old enough and if they're responsible enough to do so. But I say, you know, for most topics, it's better to allow them to learn about in a safe way versus keeping them away. Speaking of Andrew, we're talking about a lot of like Reddit stories about homeschoolers that are out there, but there is one big story about homeschooling that came out recently.
That is correct. So that was another thing that like we kind of did in preparation for this episode is, well, I didn't do it in preparation. Well, let me rephrase that. Philip didn't do it in prep for this episode. He's already just read the book or listened to it because Audible is awesome.
It's fantastic.
Audiobooks are awesome.
This is not
Audible
a sponsor thing for Audible, but if you're listening Audible and you want to sponsor us, maybe.
Or just give me more narration work. I'll take that too.
That's fair.
But that being said, he had been talking about it. In the process of me doing more research in preparation for this episode, I had seen this book pop up and I was like, I need to read this book. And it's a memoir by an individual by the name of
Stefan
Merrill Block. Yeah. And it's basically a look back at his childhood and how he was homeschooled by his mother, and all the way from end of fourth grade through middle school, through the end of middle school and going into high school as a freshman.
And so before we go too far into it, to explain to you what this book is specifically,
yes.
he kind of gave that there. It's Stefan is the writer who is telling his own personal story about his upbringing and basically his experience with homeschooling. His mother pulled him out of the school that he was in to homeschool him for the amount of time that Andrew said. But instead of really teaching him, she kind of created her own structure of education and eventually kind of ended up leaving him on his own to defend for himself in an educational style.
Yeah.
And so then this story is about what he experienced as a, we'll say, homeschooler, even though she didn't really school him as much in the story, and also what he experienced when he left homeschooling afterwards in his life in the future. It also talks a lot about his mom. She's a very interesting person in this story, and the different difficulties that she experiences as well, and how those affected him.
It is a hard book to read.
Yes.
I'm a person who I can sit and over the course of like 3 days read through a book because I'm just enjoying it and engaging in it, and like I want to pick it back up and read it. I had to force myself to sit down and keep reading it because I both had a deadline, which is a great way for someone with ADHD to like force themselves to do something they don't want to do, but also like it was like I knew I needed to read this to be able to have a good conversation about it.
Absolutely. So kind of getting deeper into this, Stefan's experiences as a homeschooler were interesting. One of the first ones that I wanted to bring up is basically when he started as a homeschooler and his mom decided to allow him to have fun homeschooling or being educated in a different location. There is one scene, if you haven't read the book, you should read the book if you want to.
Yeah, we're going to go into spoilers for the book.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
spoilers.
but also it's worth reading just to be able to experience. The guy's writing is incredible. He has really good prose. I enjoyed like the analogies that he created for a lot of the different situations were really good.
So your spoiler warning is there. And one of the scenes, he is over and enjoying a pool, like his school in the pool, basically. So he's swimming around, he's having fun, he's doing things like that. And his brother and his father come home. They're like, what are you guys doing? What have you been doing the entire day? Allegedly, they were doing education, but from what Stefan says in his book, they weren't really. They were just swimming in the pool. And so, like, I thought that was interesting because a lot of people, when they think about homeschooling, they're like, okay, what do? You just lounge around all day in your pajamas? Like, you just sit at home and you don't do anything. And so in the story, for a lot of it, yes, he does some educational things across there. And even if you read that kind of section of the book, but there's a lot of time where he's just left alone or he's allowed to just sit and do something to the point that he just eventually just wants to do school himself.
Yeah, kind of. So like the way that it was described to him is like he had to do math. That was the big thing. But what he didn't, what his mom didn't realize is that he had the teacher's textbook right there, which isn't a thing at all that happened while I was homeschooled.
Andrew.
It was not a thing that happened at all while I was homeschooled.
Was it a math textbook?
I'm not going to say that it was a teaching textbook at all.
Is this why you can't do fractions even to this day?
Listen, I didn't come on this podcast to be attacked, Philip.
I'm sorry. We shouldn't make a joke about that. This is supposed to be serious. I'm sorry.
It is why I can't do geometry, because I did just cheat in geometry really bad.
Andrew.
It's not good. I don't know how to do geometry, but that's I could learn. I could learn if I wanted to.
No, it's fair. I agree. I think you can.
But anyways, but no, so he had to do math, but his mom did leave the textbook right there. So sometimes he cheated, if not all the time. It doesn't go, I don't think it said specifically whether he actually learned it or not. But after that, he would be allowed to pursue his creative interests, because that was what his mother saw him as he was a creative individual who's being stifled by the world, stifled by the public education system. And so what's really interesting, I think, from the get-go, which was a difference that I had from the author, is that there was no religious reason as to why his mother homeschooled him. There was no we have to isolate you for religious reasons. No, it was purely because she saw him as this incredibly talented young man who was being ruined by the public education system. Yeah. And so that was part of the, so that's what his day-to-day would be. He would do his math, and then he would go work on a creative project. And he goes into details about his creative projects being things like copying the art in comic books, or watching TV and then making a paper about it, or occasionally he would read an almanac just to signify he's trying to learn, but really wouldn't do anything on it. And then the only other form of education that he did was they would do the brain quest cards. And so they would do he would just be his mom's answer was, well, if you've memorized the answers for all of this grade level's brain quest cards, you know as much as the kids that are in elementary school. And later it gets to a point where he can't do a test because he doesn't have the ability to sit down and formulate his thoughts in a way that needs to effectively be utilized for a test. So it's interesting.
I wanted to bring up, in that a very similar thing, you talked about his education, what he was doing. There is this section of the book where his mom does get upset with him, and she basically starts to ignore him.
Oh, yeah.
And so with this section, basically he gets the cold shoulder from his mother, the silent treatment, and for basically days, along with what the book has, when she's upset with him, she just won't talk to him. Now, in one way, it's okay, you thinking, how is that terrible? How is that? When there's only two people in a house, and the other person is angry with you, and they're refusing to talk to you for, let's say, 8 hours out of a day because there's no one else there.
If not longer, because dad and brother are gone.
That's horrible. And he talks about his own experience in that, because it's okay, while, you might be a little frustrated that this is the only experience you have, when you're losing the only other person you can talk to because he didn't have any other siblings that were being homeschooled with him. And that's difficult.
And that person being the person who had convinced you that you wanted to be homeschooled in the first place. It's this person who had encouraged you to become dependent on them. And now you are using that dependency as a weapon against them.
Absolutely.
And it was so painful to read. Something that was interesting, that I thought was interesting as well while reading through it, is not only is there his entire life at home became wrapped around trying to appease his mother in some way, shape, or form. If she was angry, he had to go and apologize, even if he didn't do anything wrong. If anything had happened, it was his responsibility to fix it, or the silent treatment would occurred. But it was it got to the point where they finances were a little bit tighter and things like that the mom started tutoring. The mom started inviting girls over to the house. Parents would pay for their children to come over to the house and have her teach them math, to the point where she was doing relatively successful for what it sounded like. She was teaching other kids more than her own child. And to the point of he would sit at the door of the classroom, hearing her talk to these kids and encourage them and give them words of affirmation, and imagine himself being in that position, when it's like, that was the whole reason you said you were doing this in the first place. And so what I saw throughout all that, and we're going to talk, I know, about the mom towards the end, but it was this dream versus expectation fail to match up. And then instead of just recognizing it was a fail, we dug our heels in and kept going.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so one of the things that really started to paint a picture of how unwell the mother was when she started to try and get him to dye his hair. That scene specifically, do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah, that broke my heart, because it was that reality of like, it was trying to get him to dye his hair. That was why they were in the pool.
Yes.
That was why they were in the pool in the first place, was she was trying to get his hair to go blonde. Mm-hmm. And she wanted her blonde baby boy back. And so she tried to use peroxide on his scalp to bleach his hair. And it would only turn it into like that dull orange. And it got to the point where he had like chemical burns on his forehead, because she kept putting these treatments on him. And that's just one of the many examples of some of the things that she did. But that dependency, or that wanting him to like be her little baby, mm-hmm. was wild.
She wanted her baby boy back. This is a overall topic that continues to show up, a theme throughout the book. One of the hardest things I think I read or listened to in this story was towards the beginning of his homeschool education. She wanted her baby boy back so much that she convinced him, and basically at a certain point sort of kept him walking around or moving around on his hands and knees like a baby, crawling across the floor.
Yeah.
And while it started out, it seems like as a fun, interesting thing, like a little joke, it got to the point where she was so specific that he wasn't allowed to stand up and move around on his 2 feet when she was watching.
Yeah.
And basically wouldn't let him do it in general, but he would do it when she wasn't watching across there.
And it was not just at the house, it was in public too.
Mm-hmm. And so like that isn't great. That, I would even say, that's not necessarily homeschooling. Yes, that is his experience that is across there, but like that's not what we want to promote at all. No. And I feel like that is one of the things that when people potentially read this book, they think, okay, well, if this is what homeschooling is, we don't want that. I absolutely agree. If this 100%. Is what it is, no. That said, there's a lot that went into this that was a lot more than just the education. He didn't get as much education as he really needed in that school. And that's why later on in the book, he decides that he wants to go back into school. We don't have to talk about the full experience of him actually kind of how he got out of homeschool into public school. But Andrew, so he leaves homeschooling, goes into a public school. Do you remember what happens? Is there anything we would have talked about?
There's so many things that happen when he goes back in high school. Because she is, and one of the other reasons for the crawling around on the as a baby is that she was determined that it would fix his penmanship. It was wild. Apparently, there was some study that she read that that children who crawled around as babies had better hand-eye coordination, or had better hand-eye coordination skills, and therefore would have better penmanship. So she had decided that she was brilliant and was then going to have them crawl around on their hands and knees in order to put them back in that stage so that they can then become, better writers.
Yes.
Well, his penmanship never improved, and I'm sure crawling around on your hands and knees for days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks on end definitely wouldn't do anything to your wrists or things that might also affect it. So she sent him to school with a massive clunky typewriter, like electronic typewriter, in high school in order to disguise the fact he had terrible penmanship because the mom had not worked on it other than making him crawl around. She sent him, said that he had this condition where he had to type. And on top of all of that, sent him, instead of with a backpack, she sent him with like a massive, was it like a tote or a filing cabinet?
It was a filing cabinet.
It was a filing cabinet that she sent him with. And like, he later talks about the reality of like, I think she was trying to get me laughed out of the school.
Mocked. So like, imagine you're already homeschooled. Okay. For those public schoolers out here who can't even think about that, imagine you're already homeschooled. You're going into a new location. You don't know anyone that's in these class. Beyond just being the weird kid, you walk into this room with the loudest typewriter you can possibly find, and you're just banging away on this typewriter. Secondarily, you have a filing cabinet beside you that you're rolling down the hole. People were made fun of for rolling backpacks.
That's so true.
Let alone a filing cabinet. No, I didn't have to experience this. And I was going to make a joke about having a filing cabinet at home. I didn't. I did not have a filing cabinet at home or anything like that. Like that's not even like near that. Did you?
I did have. So what I had, and I actually really liked it. It was quirky. When I hit middle school, I wanted a locker because I wasn't going to school. So I told Mom, I was like, Mom,
nice.
I want a locker.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, well, those are expensive to find like just a single one.
Yeah.
So here's what I'll do. So she got me one of those like stand up, like plastic like lockable bins that had a hole in it for where you could put like a lock on it.
Yes.
And so she's like, okay, cool. So here's that. I'll give you a security lock. Here's the code. You can put all of your school books in it. And when you can go in the morning, or if you want to get out different ones, you can switch through them. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. This makes me feel like a middle schooler. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And then I used it like 3 weeks and I was like, this is stupid. I don't want to have to keep opening my lock. And I
Why
threw
do
it away
people
and just
do
kept
this?
my books everywhere. And I'm just like, and now as an adult, I realized, yeah, because the locker is stupid. And a lot of schools don't even use lockers anymore.
No.
A lot of them, just the lockers are just there.
Yeah. The second thing I want to talk about there is when he went to school, he got really sick.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
generally because, and the doctor kind of laughed at him later on in there, his immune system was a little bit weaker. Personal story from Philip over here. When I actually went to quasi public school in that towards the end of my high school experience, I also got really sick. And it was like more of a, like, you don't really think about how many people that you're around on a daily basis if you're in a public school, especially if you just went there. You're just around other kids almost constantly. You're sitting next beside them. You're in the desk, they're around there. Like, yes, I went to church often. I got to like be around people. Like, I wasn't far away from them, but I didn't have as much of a continued exposure to other individuals.
And a lot of kids don't come to church sick. They have a lot of kids go to school sick because the parents can't or don't want to keep them home.
I would get sick like at least once a month until I kind of got over it. I got a little stronger. It didn't last for very long, but it was a shocking realization, like, wow, I need to, like, you know, get a little better about this. It's not like a terrible thing. I don't think that's like something horrible, but I thought it was really fun that I had that. Well, not fun. I thought it was interesting that I had a similar experience to him in that getting sick. But another experience that he had that you thought was interesting across there. Andrew.
Yeah, so one of the ones that like really stuck with me, and this is something that I did. Then this is what hurt. There were some things that happened throughout the story, and I was like, oh, that's me. I did that.
Same.
But like one of the ones was he started to belittle himself so that people would like want to be near him and like want to be friends with him, to the point where like it was literally like he would put on this nerdy facade and like do a little list because he got his braces really tight and make fun of himself and like with really crude jokes and things of that nature. But like it was like I did things like that. I didn't make fun of myself, but I also recognized when I first started becoming social. So I think I would say like as I was exiting middle school, going into high school,
Yep.
I was so desperate to have friends that I would try and adapt to any environment that I was in so that I had something to talk about, or that like I had something to contribute to the conversation, which now I learn as an adult is actually what happens. You learn a little bit, and so you can contribute, or, you know, you recognize that you don't know anything and you express that and let people kind of like let them talk about their things that they're passionate about. But when I was a kid, I was like, well, if I like the things that everyone else likes, then they'll like me.
Sure.
And so I will tell them I like things. And then I got caught constantly because I didn't actually know anything of what I was talking about. Or I just looked foolish because I'd wrap myself up into like a verbal trap where I like talked myself into a corner because I didn't know what I was doing or I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yep.
And it ended up hurting me a lot more. Or the people that I would hang around with didn't actually care about me. I was just like there because I would be kind of like the funny thing. And it happened like that was a pattern that happened all the way up and through like past high school. Like that happened until I was in college. There was a time where like I was trying to impress a group of friends, like really close friends, like friends that I shouldn't have had to make up stories with. And I came up with this, like, they were all telling all of these like scandalous tales of their like college and high school days. And I wanted to be a part of it because I didn't feel like I had anything. And so like I made up this whole story about this, like, not like it was nothing crazy. It was literally like a kiss, but like this whole torrent affair of like a story
Andrew,
about how something happened.
You kissed someone?
Mm-hmm. I know. I've kissed one person quite a bit, actually. But like I was so worried in that moment of like, okay, these people, if they think I'm this goody two shoes and they think I've like lived this sheltered life, that then they're not going to want to be friends with me and they're not going to like me anymore.
Yeah.
And so I came up with this story that was an awful lie. And it was a lie that ended up coming back to bite me because one of the people started telling other people about it.
Yep.
And then it got out to other like friends and parents and things of that nature. And like they started asking me questions and it was just like, oh, I didn't think this through at all. And then when I started telling people it was a lie, they're like, okay, yeah, sure it was. And like, but it was. And that was the sad reality of like, I lied a lot to try and get attention. I lied about some things I'm really ashamed that I lied about because I wanted to get attention from it. And it was like, no, it's one of those things that it's like, I look back at it now and see why I did it. But it was also at the same side of like being in that, like, I'm so worried that I'm going to lose the friends that I have, that I have to do whatever I can to keep them.
Yeah. And in the same vein as that, when you're talking about kisses that are there, his also experience with romance.
That was rough.
Yes.
That was rough.
That was also the whole storyline that it was very difficult for me to read through there. His different kind of forays into trying to find love and trying to find people who appreciated him for who he was. Allegedly, in his story, he did have some stuff on his face. Like his face wasn't, I think he had like a lot of acne that was there. So he felt like he wasn't as, we'll say, beautiful or as handsome across there. And so he
thought he was quite ugly.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yes.
He had a very poor self-image.
And so a lot of his storyline, it's going in where he has a very low self-esteem because of what he feels he experienced. And then also very low self-esteem because of what he feels he looks like. And it's just like sad to hear him go from online romance to a physical, like in person where he thinks it's there but doesn't really happen, to experimenting with different kinds of people to go over and see what love would look like for him. But also how difficult that entire process was for him, seeing that he had such a warped idea of what compassion and love was because of his upbringing.
Yeah.
To try to go into the world and see it. What I did appreciate is in the story, he does talk about how there were some teachers and there were other people,
Yes.
adults that are in his life that saw him, that appreciated him, that realized he was struggling, and instead of just looking the other way, they did what they could to help.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the most uplifting things that I heard in the entire story, was how many people were there to help him.
And it's one of those things that I wanted to talk about in regards to some of this misconception, sometimes from the homeschool community to the public school community, is that people there, I heard this narrative a lot, and I wouldn't say it was from my family, but I definitely heard it from other families, or I heard it being whispered or talked about, where it was like, the teachers in the public school system are trying to indoctrinate. They don't care about your kids. They're just there for a paycheck. Like they'll never be able to care about my child the way that I care about them. And
I agree.
While that is true, I agree that like no one will love your child as much as you do. There are a lot of teachers who walk into those schools every day and deeply care and worry and hope and pray for these kids each and every day.
Yep.
And then you have those interactions where it's like a teacher is just like, hey, I know you, like, when he came back in after failing his first test and asked his mom, like, and the teacher asked him a question about what was on it and he could give the answer. And he just, I don't remember the exact quote. I wish I had highlighted it, but it was basically,
me cry, because that was such a sad
it was such a sad scene. But
go
the teacher
ahead.
was like, you know, when I look at a kid like you, a kid who has been away from school for years, doing his best to try and make his way here, you know what I'm thinking? And he says in his mind, he's thinking, how hopeless, how pathetic, how just plain sad. But she doesn't say any of that. She says, how brave. And it was just like, there are teachers that so care.
Yes.
And like, I remember, obviously I'm not going to go into like details of ages or anything, but I remember this one kid that I've subbed for, and I've subbed for them quite a couple of times. And I remember the first times that I worked with him on math. And he was written down as an individual who had some challenges and things of that nature. And I was like, so if I went in with that expectation, like, oh, this is going to be a problem child and, you know, thing, like I can't work with it. Like if I went in with that expectation, I wouldn't be able to effectively help. I would have to, you know, overcome all of these different frustrations and already come in with a pre-assumption of how things were going to go. But I was able to help him understand something and understand a concept. And like his home teacher is phenomenal, and they are an amazing person who deeply cares for their students. But it was one of those, and I don't know if it was just because I was a substitute or it was just I was someone different, but someone who like sat there with him, worked through the problem, and like let him know that he could do this. And it was like one of those moments, even though I don't ever want to teach that grade level again, it is one of those moments that I'm just like, that's the power of education and believing in a child. And so it was so hard to read that, because it's like the mom, which I think is a good segue because we can talk about the mom talked that way. She talked about believing that he was going to be this next great artist, this next great person that contributed to the world.
Yes.
And yet he never fully felt like, at least from what I remember, that she believed in him.
Yeah. So since we're talking about the mom, I know it's kind of like, you're like, oh, you guys didn't talk about the mom as much in this story, even though that she's one of the main characters that are across here. Kind of what you talked about. The mom wanted to before be a writer. She had a whole idea about making a children's book, basically, and going over and doing that. Later on, she found Stefan's writing to be very good. And obviously, like, he is now a very well-known writer because he has this book out we're talking about now. Like, he's actually a really good writer that's across there. but she really wanted him to, at a young age, really lean into that. And like you said, was saying that he could be the best writer of our age, really change the world through his art, through his creativity. What I saw a lot in that initial idea, and what I even see for a lot of parents that are out there, is they take a lot of the mentality and the things that they felt like they should have done when they were younger, and they pass that off to their kids. And like, I do understand that mentality, because it's like, okay, if I wasn't able to eat ice cream as a kid, if I ever had children, I probably would be like, hey, here's as much ice cream as I can potentially give you. If I had to struggle for, let's say, food in general, then I'm going to try to make sure that whoever comes after doesn't have to struggle with that.
Yeah.
And so what we saw here is, a lot of the time it felt like the mom wanted to create a world for her son that she wished she had experienced. But she did it in such a way that was very, I'm going to say myopic. It was very focused in on, okay, if I can keep him away from all the stuff that I feel ruined my life, then he won't be, quote, ruined.
Yeah.
And while it showed so much about how much she cared, it was like, if you read the book, a lot of people can have different opinions on it. But what I feel personally is, she does love her son. What we see in the story is not a person who doesn't care about her kid, but we see a person who is going about it in such a very strong, and I would even say incorrect way, that it goes from this strong love and strong compassion to something that's actually hurting the kid in the long run.
Yeah.
And so that first of trying to create a world around him that she didn't have, I feel sad about, but I'm also like, I don't feel that it's the greatest way to go about it. But
I think, no, and I think you're absolutely right. I think there's this definitely an element of like, I want to give you the things I didn't have. I wished that someone could have done this for me when I was your age. And it's like, to some extent, yes, I agree with that. But also it's the recognition of, okay, but you are also not doing it the right way. You can do so much harm by trying to do the opposite of what happened to you.
yeah.
One of the, I'll let you in just a second, because one of the things that happened to me a lot, one of the reasons from when I turned 17 to when I turned 20, I gained 150 pounds during those 3 years. And the reason for that is because, and this is, I already let my mom know I was going to be talking about this and stuff like that, but because we had a very unhealthy perception of food in our house. Food was an enemy, food was poison, or sugar was poison. All of these things were, terrible. I couldn't eat, but also whenever we wanted to reward ourselves, we would get a sweet treat or something like that was a reward that we had to go for. And so when I got out of the house and I could drive, I got all the McDonald's I wanted. I got all of the Chick-fil-A. I would stop. Sometimes I would plan a route where I would stop by 2 racetracks so that I could get a drink at one and then refill it at the next one before I got to where I was supposed to go. And it's like, and it was that, yes, my mom was trying to protect me and trying to help me, but by creating that unhealthy relationship with food, it's taken me years to move past that and to be able to get to a point where I'm comfortable with my body and working on trying to become healthier, not because I want to look a certain way, but because I want to be healthy. I want to feel healthy, but it takes time. And it's like, you have to be so careful to not hyper push one way because you're worried about them experiencing something that you had on the other side.
Yeah, completely agree. It's difficult. I think one of the other difficulties that she had to go through is kind of what we talked about before, with him crawling around and also with him changing his hair, is she missed the kind of person he was when he was a child. Which I have even spoken to my own parents about in some ways about it. It's like I can only imagine you have these little small beings that are there. They were little tiny. Even my dad said, he was like, I love seeing you when you guys were so small, and sometimes I do miss when you guys were little tiny. I could hold you in my arms. I could just see you as little kids, but then you grow up. And I think that's a difficult transition. Like, I have not experienced that at all, but I can only imagine how difficult it can be for you knowing that you won't get that time back again. And so many people go, okay, appreciate those moments, appreciate that. In this story, it seems like instead of just going, okay, I understand that he's growing up, he's getting bigger, he's growing into himself, she decides to try to basically stunt that growth.
Yeah.
Stop him from getting bigger, stop him from changing his hair, stop him from any of these new things that are happening.
To the point where he was like hiding puberty.
Yes.
Which was horrible.
Horrible. But it's like that kind of sad situation where it's like I get how that could be a horribly difficult situation to get past. That said, it has to happen. And even like when we're talking about, like, I, in some ways, I'll be honest, I didn't necessarily like growing up. I liked being a little kid. I liked being able to hang out and doing those kinds of things. And I would stop sometimes, probably because I have other things going on in my head there, but I would stop sometimes and I would think to myself, I'm going to miss this. Like, I think it's probably because, again, I would think like, okay, is this the last time I'm going to swing on the swings? Is this the last time that I'm going to go outside and play in this way? This is the last time I'm going to, play around with my action figures and stuff like that. Like, is this the moment where this ends?
It's a really disturbingly deep thought from a child's mind, but also like it happens.
That's my mind, and that's how I went across it. And so like I can only imagine as a parent also dealing with that kind of, I won't say trauma, but complication where you're just like, I know this is going to end. I can see it happening. Yeah. In the case of Safan, basically his childhood in that small baby stage was already over, and she was trying to make him go back. And I could feel for her and the reasons that she was pushing for it. But also it's like, no, you have to be able to be strong enough to realize and appreciate that these times are there. I love the quote that someone said before that was like, one of the reasons why childhood is so precious is because it's so finite. And it's like, yeah, if it lasts forever, you wouldn't actually care about it as much. But because you know that these moments are only for, let's say, 3-4 years, and then they get bigger and they grow, it makes it mean so much more.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too that, like, it demonstrates one of the mom's biggest challenges, which was a intense level of like codependency and enmeshment with her child.
Yep.
And it's something that happens even later in the book where like he is in high school, and the cool part about it is ninth and 10th grade were rough for him. But by 11th grade, he was hanging out with the honor roll students and was like actually starting to achieve and starting to win, so to speak. And it was like, that was his way of trying to show his mom, hey, the homeschooling worked. Yeah. Even in high school, and and a part of him was trying to do well so that he could go to a college that he could, get away from home and get away from his mom. Another part of him was desperately trying to seek her approval. And there was a story that happened, and it's later down the road, but one of the anecdotes he talks about is one of his hamsters he had a male and female pet hamster. Mama got pregnant and had a whole litter of, I think it's pups, right? Hamster pups.
I don't know, but yeah,
it was super cute sounding. And so they took all of them. After a little bit, they kept them as long as they could, but you can't keep 9 hamsters in one enclosure. You gotta either get rid of some of them or start finding new homes for them. But they took them to a pet store, and then when they got back, the mother hamster fell into like a depressive state. And then literally the next day he went in to go see her and she was no longer moving. Later in high school, the mom made a comparison to that when he was talking about going to college and leaving away, about how that because she loved him so much, it would be a challenge. So she was saying it was like basically comparing, if you leave, it would be the same thing as you taking those children away from that mother, and he literally like point blank asks her, are you saying you're going to die if I'm not here? And she literally is like, I'm just saying that I love you so much. And it's so much in that realm of intense emotional codependency and enmeshment, where you are just so like your life exists only because of this person, or only because like she is so enmeshed herself with her son that literally him leaving, and later when he does finally leave, she starts getting sick and like literal physical symptoms to him not being present with her anymore that she ends up blaming him for, which is horrible. Like, this wouldn't have happened. This only happened when you moved away.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a whole situation that happens with her. And like you said, the enmeshment, I'd say, like what you were saying before, the codependency or dependency that I guess that she has on her son. And so like what we kind of talked about before, I think I spoke about it in a previous episode. For those parents who are at home for hours on end without any other social interaction, you don't really have friends, you don't have other people out there, my heart goes out to you, because I can only imagine how difficult that is. Having also a kid there that you're trying to not only just keep alive, but educate, whole nother layer on top of this. And I'm pretty sure I've said this before, like that is incredible. Once again, very brave of you. Well done. If you're doing this correctly, keep going with it. If you're not, still, it's a hard job. It's a very difficult job to be a parent. It's even more difficult to be a parent and a teacher at the same time. Absolutely.
As one who is just doing half of that with the teaching part.
Exactly. What you're kind of saying too is she had this connection, or this need of connection with her son, that at first was only about, okay, I want you to be home so I can protect you from the world. Then became, I need you to be the kind of kid that I miss, basically. I want you to regress to a younger age. And then finally it just became, I don't want you to leave.
Yeah. I'm not ready for you to leave.
I'm not ready for you to leave. And so then we also have like a whole stories with her and the situation that she has with her sister and the complications that happen there. The whole thing with her mother-in-law, I think, who comes over and basically is telling her that she's doing this wrong, that she's hurting her son, that it's not working out well. And how many other viewpoints and perspectives that she is constantly having there. And the one thing that she leans on throughout this entire situation is basically her relationship with her son. And then later on, I don't know if it's like her sister or her friend, one of their children passes away.
Yeah, her best friend.
And that drives her even deeper into this. Which I can only imagine the fear after seeing something so tragically horrible happen to someone you care about. Not being able to stop that, and then knowing this kid is basically your entire world. Yeah. Once again, she didn't do this for religious reasons. She didn't homeschool for religious reasons. She didn't homeschool for anything other than trying to make sure that her son, that she feels is a savant, is successful.
Yeah.
And all she wanted was to make sure he stayed near. And so towards the end of the story, it's a lot of him realizing how much of his life was tied around his mother's fear of abandonment, how much of his experience was because she was so lonely and so confused about various things that happened to her. I'm not going to spoil those parts of the story, but she does go into and talk about some of the reasons why she did what she did. And then later on, also not going to spoil, she does blame him for a lot of her physical ailments, but we find out other things about it.
Yeah.
And so it's like this whole, when we talk about parents and we talk about homeschooling in general, a lot of the times when it's not going well, it's not necessarily because the educational system in homeschool is bad, as much as being a parent is hard. Mm-hmm. Being able to educate a person is hard. Teaching is not easy. That's why people go to school to do it and to learn about it. But even if you've gone to school, actually being in that situation, being around a bunch of kids and educating them is still difficult.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, doing all of these things when you're also dealing with so much mental anguish and mental, I'd say, abnormalities and issues that are across there is so difficult that I feel for anyone who's trying to do that with all of those things together.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, and like this might be a good segue out of talking about the book a little bit, but one of the things that broke my heart constantly while I was reading it was his desire to have a community.
Yeah.
Was his desire to have friends, was his desire to be around people, and how much his mom needed that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, that's something that I'm going to constantly encourage. I do not think you can, and I will stand on a soapbox for this.
Okay.
I do not, you can come after me. You can come in the comments, go for it. We can have a discussion. You cannot successfully homeschool by yourself. You need,
what do you mean by that?
Support.
Okay.
You need friends that you can go to that can either mentally help you, that you can talk to about your challenges. Your child needs people that they can talk to and that they can interact with and that they can engage with. You need support in your life to be able to help you on those days where you cannot do it. One of the things I come back to all the time, and one of the things I love about the interview we had with my parents, or our parents, I should say, is listening. I gained a new respect for my dad through that. And I love, like, one of the things I've loved about this podcast is not just learning more about me, but like going back and talking to my parents and like delving more into like our childhood and stuff like that. But like, I gained a new respect for my dad because it was the reality of, he was my mom's support when she had those days. Mm-hmm. When it was the days where everything went wrong, nothing was going right, he was the first person in her corner to be like, you're doing great. I love you. Go take a bath. Just relax. I will take care of the kids. It's like, you need someone in your corner. And she didn't have that.
No.
He didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's just one person, but if you don't have a community, if you do not have people that you can rely on and lean upon, I think this is true in anything. You're going to eventually start to wither away.
I agree.
We are not built as individuals, even if you are an introvert or an extrovert. And I stand on this. We are not built to be people who live in isolation.
Absolutely.
And so, especially if you're doing something as challenging as homeschooling, something as challenging as educating someone, even if it's just one, or especially if it's more than one, you need help.
Yeah.
And
Find a community.
And you need a community. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm going to challenge, especially for parents who are continuing to do this, is don't feel like you have to figure it all out yourself. You are not a failure if you need or ask for help.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things I just wished both the mom and the kid did throughout, is just ask for help. I wished he would have been like, when his aunt, or when his mother, or the mother-in-law came into town and she saw how bad it was, that instead of him trying to pretend it wasn't, mm-hmm. that he would have like, yes, you're right. This is, I don't know what's happening. But, and then when she was in those states of like, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, instead of doubling down and like, no, it's fine, it's us against the world, we'll figure it out, she would have been like, hey, honey, you're really detail oriented, talking to her husband. Can you help me figure out how to do this? Mm-hmm. Had she been willing to allow people in to build that community, we could have had a very different situation. He could have had a very different situation.
Absolutely.
And I think about my childhood, and obviously I talk about my mom and dad, but like we talked about church, which is why I think that's like an excellent like support.
I agree.
For people who are in like homeschooling, things like that. But if you're not religious, and I respect that you might homeschool if you're not religious, there are still communities, and there are still, co-ops. One of my best memories growing up is I spent almost every afternoon in our cul-de-sac, because I had two best friends. One was at the corner house, and one was over, like they were on opposite sides of the cul-de-sac, and my house was like right in the middle. And so we would like hang out at each other's houses, and we go and do things. And like, that was my friend group, even though I'd be home all day, but I'd wait until he got home, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to go out there and hang out. And then his dad would yell at me because I interrupted him before he did homework. And I'm like, I'll help him with his homework. And then I was doing middle school homework when I was in elementary school still, but it's homeschool nerd stuff.
Yeah.
But it was just, it was like, I had a community. I had friends. I had people I could go to and I could, engage with.
Yeah. Which is incredible.
It's so, but that's what's important. Had I not had that isolation, that feeling of being alone would have been so much stronger.
Absolutely. And I feel that's the biggest one. I'd say community, you need that support in the same way. Kind of going along with that, I have two things, but the first one I'm going to say towards it after community is that kind of support. I think curriculum, having an actual like educational system is important. Yes, I understand that some parents are really good at just being able to teach and go through things. That said, if you really think about it, do we even know how much information we know about any topic?
Yeah.
Let's say if I was trying to explain to someone how to do a movie, I don't think I have enough information just off the top of my dome to even explain it properly for them to be able to do that. And so if we're thinking about like things as simple as like reading or writing or simple math or something like that, like while you can do it, explaining it is a little more difficult. I'd say a lot more difficult than actually just doing the process yourself. And that's why oftentimes it's like, I'll just do it myself instead. And so having the support of books and other materials where other people have said, this is the easiest way to teach someone how to read or how to spell. My mom will talk about it often. My dad will talk about it often. That curriculum, all the other things that we went through and learned from, supported them so much, because whenever they hit like a spot where they're like, I don't know what I'm really talking about here, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, those books were there to go like, well, this is what you probably need to do. If they're struggling on this part, this is how you can probably get past that. And yes, when they didn't have that online, they really didn't have online as much when I was in homeschool, but now there's so many other resources that you can go to learn and kind of grow in that way. So I'd say find a good curriculum that works for you.
Yeah. And that's like, I know it's hard because there is that whole method of unschooling, which is a whole part of, we are not an unschooling podcast, I will say.
We're a homeschooling podcast.
Well, we are formerly homeschooled podcast.
Sorry.
But that's like one of the things that that's like, from my understanding of unschooling, that's kind of the way that he was taught. Was like, you do this one thing that you have to do for curriculum, and then you pursue your interests. And I know there are different methodologies to it. I don't know enough about unschooling to effectively talk about it, but I stand by you in that need for curriculum. So like, I, again, still learning, teaching, like literally one of the big things I have to do is like study my material, and then I have to take a test to demonstrate that I have mastery of the material that I'm going to then teach to students.
Yes.
A certification test. And so I then have to prove mastery in that. And even when proving mastery, I will still have to sit and plan out lessons and figure out, like, what is the best way of getting to these different like benchmarks that need to be reached for students.
Lesson plan.
Yes, a lesson plan. But even as like a Taekwondo instructor, like that's another, like a very interesting like aspect of teaching Taekwondo that people don't think about, because you're just like, oh, you just teach how to kick or you teach how to do things. Like, no, we have had to develop a very intentional lesson plan of like, okay, this week we're going to be touching on these topics, and then to make sure that we don't only focus on this one thing, we're going to then shift gears over to this one, and we have to plan it out in advance to make sure, especially since our school only teaches one night a week, we have to hit all of the topics over that month, or else students are going to miss out on topics. And so like when we first started, we kept finding out, because we didn't have lesson plans, that we would focus on the things that we were super passionate about, and then we'd miss self-defense, which is one of the most important parts of Taekwondo. Or we'd miss, sparring, which is like the competitive side of Taekwondo that a lot of people enjoy and some of us deeply hate. The ones at this table deeply hate it. I'm not going to a tournament this weekend that I'm terrified of. You are. Just kidding.
Oh no.
But that being said, it's like curriculum is so helpful because it does help guide. And then what you get to do is then you make it your own.
Yeah.
And let your kids explore the material in their own way. That was one of my favorite things that we did with one of our programs. I don't remember. I think it was history, because I just remember doing this in history, but I'm sure it was in other ones. But when we did it, it was like I got to explore the content that we did in one of like several. There was like hands-on ways, or creative thinking ways, or like analytical ways, or like build a scale replica of a pyramid, or something. Like, you could do that, or bake a cake and cut it into pieces and make it into a pyramid. It's like all these different ways to engage with the pyramids. And it was like, that's awesome, because really cool. It lets you get to kind of like play around and explore things and get to do stuff. And so like, that's the power of curriculum though.
Yes.
Is a curriculum encouraged my mom to do that.
Yeah.
And that might be something that you just don't have the idea to do.
That's true. And they do cost a good bit if you're looking into that. But once again, you find a community. Please find a community.
Yes.
And then oftentimes sharing different curriculum across, find a homeschool parent that potentially doesn't need that kind of curriculum anymore and can pass it over, or potentially sell it to you for a lot less than you would have there. But like, that's why community is important. Second thing I feel is curriculum. Third thing I want to say, and this is the last thing for me, and I think potentially the last thing for what we're talking about today, is basically hope. It is incredibly difficult. I can imagine that, and even my mom and my dad have talked about before. If you want to go back to the podcast, the episode where we talk about them trying to homeschool us and successfully doing so, they're like, they were so worried that we wouldn't be able to read. Because if you're thinking about it, you've got this babbling child, and you're like, I've got to take this kid and go from them just saying whatever comes out of their brain to them actually being able to comprehend random little lines on a page. How do you do that? Like, where do you even start? It worked. It has worked so many times. And if you continue working at it, I do believe if you're a homeschool parent out there, it'll happen. Use your resources, use your community, be patient, and it'll be there. But also in that same way, if you're a current homeschool student or a former homeschool student, I'm not going to say, hey, look at us, we survived, we made it out, we were there. But in a very similar way, it's not all dire and terrible.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it was awkward. Yes, I did get very sick when I started going to public school and doing that stuff like that. Yes, I did have some weird social situations there and still have to deal with that sometimes. But I will say overall, having that confidence and that positivity that despite the experience that you had there, if you didn't like it or something was terrible, that there is a future, that you are going to find something. And if you're a homeschool parent and you're still homeschooling your kid there, trust me in this way of, I'm happy that you're even listening to this episode. I'm happy that you're even thinking about going over and looking for support. Just because of that, I feel like It'll be okay.
Yeah. But I think you really like kind of hit the nail on the head when you were talking about hope. And that's something that like, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to share this is, yes, talking to the parents and talking to the, you know, people who were or who are currently homeschooled. But I also wanted to talk specifically to the individuals who are coming out of being homeschooled. Mm-hmm. And I want to preface this with, I recognize that I do not know your situation. I want to share a little bit of my life just because I want people to know where I'm coming from with certain things and why I feel that I can say, like, give some credibility to what I'm saying. But when we were being homeschooled, I talked about it before, but my older brother and my younger brother were diagnosed with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. That pretty much happened when I was around 3 or 4 years old. So very early in my childhood. My brother was diagnosed when he was like 6 or 7, and my little brother was diagnosed like they were able to diagnose him as he was being born, like right at the beginning to start everything. And that hit my mom hard. Like that, both my parents, but specifically my mom, who was already planning on homeschooling us and starting that process, hit her hard. And I look at this story and I think about how if wrong things had happened, we could have very easily been in this situation. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of days where, especially at the beginning, where I remember my mom sleeping a lot. And I remember kind of being not left to my own devices, but just, you know, doing schoolwork or having to take care of myself. And I'm sure it wasn't as much as I'm remembering it is, but also just knowing that like there was a lot of depression that was going on, and understandably so. There was a lot of, I've talked about it before, being put in a caretaker role as my brothers got older and I had to do it. I was, and he can't complain about it now. I was as a elementary school kid, helping to wipe my brother's butt at a young age, like a thing that not a lot of kids ever, like a lot of people don't ever have, like the first time a lot of people ever experience having to do that is with like a parent, an elderly parent. And that was my childhood. That was kind of like a thing. And it was just because there was a need for it. And that was the position I was put in. And I'm sure some people will look at that and be like, well, how dare you be put in that position? And why couldn't your parents do X, Y, Z? And I'm not going to go there in any way, shape, or form, because everyone's family is different and everyone rises to different expectations and abilities. And I don't look back at that as something where I'm mad at my parents for, because I just was trying to help and that was the best way that I could. But it did put me in a position where I didn't think about myself. If I thought about myself, it was more of just like how can I distract myself a little bit with life? But I didn't think about my future. I didn't think about what I was doing next. I didn't think about where I was going to go. I just kind of focused on helping take care of my brother, help take care of the house, do what I needed to do. And then my brother graduated high school, which was not something that the doctor said was going to happen. They said he was going to die at 15, and he graduated high school. But it felt like all of this expectation was placed upon me in that moment. And suddenly someone who had been a background character, even at church, I was called so-and-so. Oh, you're so-and-so's brother, right? Mm-hmm. You're so-and-so's. For most of my entire, even like being at that church for years, people still called me that because that was my identity, was being his brother. Mm-hmm. So then I moved into a position where I have to be in charge of my own life and I have to plan for my future and figure out what I'm going to do. And I didn't know what to do. And I will say, like, educationally wise, I was equipped. I had relatively solid understanding of certain things, not geometry. But I can do a lot of things without geometry.
Absolutely.
But my parents put that pressure on me of like, you need to go to school, you need to get a degree. I had gotten my AA degree through high school doing like the general education route, but I didn't know what I wanted to do because I had never thought about what I was going to do past, taking care of my brothers and taking care of the house. Mm-hmm. And so then now I'm becoming an adult and now I have to figure out what I'm going to do. And that became my life for so long, of just drifting from one thing to the next to try and find my passion. I was going to be a professional golfer at one point in time. I was going to be a worship pastor. I was going to be a professional actor and singer, or I was going to be I was going to do all of these different things. I was going to be a lifelong server or a bartender, or, all of these different jobs, a 911 dispatcher. But nothing ever clicked, and I floated. And it wasn't until I continued doing this opportunity with Taekwondo, where I started getting into something where I was actively getting to help and teach. And I was terrible at it at first. I want to preface that I was not a natural at first. I struggled. I didn't want to talk to adults and tell them that they messed something up. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be like, you did great. I just want to make them feel good. It took a long time for me to get comfortable with correction and teaching and growing and things of that nature, but it eventually came. And then by exploring that more and more, and eventually getting a almost more sustainable job teaching Taekwondo over a year, it opened my eyes to how much I enjoyed teaching and how much I had a passion for helping people learn and grow and develop. And so now, at 29 years old, at the time I was 28, I'm going back to college for my bachelor's. And I'm not saying that as in I'm not sharing this story to be, oh, woe is him. He did. Every single one of those experiences has been something I can look back on and see some skill set, see something that I can pull from that has helped me get to where I am today. Obviously, in the moment, I didn't feel that. Mm-hmm. But I share this for those of you who might be listening, who are in the midst of, I don't know what to do, and I feel like I can't do anything, and I feel trapped and hopeless. There is hope. There is more past where you're at. I will not assume what you're going through was not awful. I will not assume that what your situation wasn't terrible. But what I can say with confidence is that every single day we have the opportunity to try and do something else. If you are no longer being homeschooled, if you are no longer, you might be in your parents' household, but if you're not in your parents' household and you're away from that, you have the freedom to pursue your passions. You have a freedom to pursue an education. You have a freedom to do all of these things, and it's scary and it's terrifying and you feel like you're on your back foot. But you're going to realize very quickly, and I'm going to encourage you this as I've met more and more people, a lot of people who went to public school, who are out in the real world, feel that way too about a lot of things. Yes, there are very specific things that homeschooling can not set you up for that being in public school can, but there are also other things that just because you went to public school does not prepare you for them, because public school does not prepare you for taxes. It felt like that was appropriate with it being close to tax season if it hasn't passed.
Yeah.
But all that to be said, I just wanted to share that because that is kind of what has been sitting heavy on my heart since we started the semester. And I kind of told you when we were planning out our episodes, I was like, I want to do this episode. And you made a face because you were just like, Andrew, no, we can't. And I was like, but we have to.
We have to talk about it. We have to go into it.
Yeah.
Which hopefully through the episode, you found something that was empowering or something that you didn't know about before that now you are excited to go back into the world and use in your everyday kind of situation. Yeah. I know this wasn't an easier episode. I know it wasn't our normal fun, quippy, interesting things, but I do feel like it is important to talk about the other sides of it. And I think, yeah, it's a good thing to actually discuss. Yeah. But in our discussion, if you want to continue on with this, if you want to talk to us more about all these topics, please reach out to us on our socials.
Yeah. So if you would like to continue to interact with us, you can reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram. We also are on YouTube, Spotify. So please feel free to leave a comment. We read every single one. And if you disagree with us, if you agree with us, if you want to learn more, I'd love to share with you. Philip, I'm assuming, is probably going to put a link to the book that we talked about today in the show notes. So please make sure that if that's something that's interesting you, that's the story interested you and you want to learn more about it, I would encourage you to read it, because even at the end of the book, Stefan made this very important point, similar to like we talked about, of recognizing that homeschooling might not be right for everyone. And he, even someone who went through something terrible like this, is not saying ban homeschooling. He is very much saying recognize the cost of what you're going to do. And so if you want to continue to engage with us on this topic or have any questions for us, we'd love to answer. Please feel free to reach out to us. Or if you want to send us an email, you can do so at shelteredsages@gmail.com. But I think that's really it for today.
That's the episode. For this one, basically comment whatever you'd like. This is the final episode of our semester of this one. You made it to the end. Say whatever topic you want there. That's okay. It's open to your interpretation. We appreciate all of you for listening this entire time. We appreciate all of you for sticking in with us through this episode, and we're excited to see what happens next.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next time.
Bye.